Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Vandiver, a retired Methodist minister living back in my hometown of Anderson, South Carolina. And I had the privilege of being the associate pastor here at St. John's for 6 years. But after I retired in '08, Donna and I moved back here, and we're living out on Lake Hartwell and having a good time. In my retirement, I'm serving 2 United Methodist churches and enjoying being in this part of the country again, a very special time. This afternoon, I want you all to know that this may be the last time that you see me alive. I'm fixing to do something that maybe I won't live beyond this afternoon. I don't know anybody that's worked any harder to make this afternoon possible than my wife, Donna. Donna, stand up. Stand up. There are many things she's done in life that she has never been given all the credit that she deserves, including the fact that she married me. But she has really, really worked hard for us to be able to do this. On behalf of Dr. Stephen Love, who is the pastor here at St. John's, and his wife, Mamie, I want to welcome you to St. John's and to thank St. John's for all that they have done to make this concert possible today. And the organist, Anita Jubin, is here today, and we thank her for all her help as well. A few housekeeping matters before I do any further introductions. Number one, restrooms are out this door to the left and then back to the right and all the way to the rear of the building. There are offering plates at each of the exits, and we would ask you to consider, if you have appreciated the concert, making a contribution to the deferment of the cost of the concert today. After the concert, there will be a reception in the parlor, which again, out this door right here, to the left, and you can't miss it, so please come by there. One of our special donors today, who I don't think has arrived, Peggy Alt, is she here? I don't think she is, but we want to thank her in a special way for her contribution in making this as possible also. I don't know how many of you were here several years ago whenever Jonathan came. Donna and I got him to come to help us celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary. And I was more extensive then than I'm going to be now, but just simply to say, whenever I was in seminary in Washington, D.C., Donna and I were active at a Presbyterian church out in McLean, Virginia. And at that time, Jonathan was in the youth group there and had just started taking organ lessons from the man who was the organist at Louisville, Jay Clark. Jay came to me mean a lot to all of us who were there, and that's how he got his start. We lost contact over quite a number of years, but finally made recontact one time whenever we went to Spoleto and didn't think we were going to get to go, and Donna opened up the program. And lo and behold, here was the name of Jonathan Dimmock. So we got to reacquaint with him, and then he came back for our 50th wedding anniversary. Jonathan. This man right here is a mighty special person. He's not only a fantastic, wonderful, worldwide known organist, he's a great human being. And I can't tell you enough how much Donna and I have enjoyed the last couple of days of, again, reconnecting. Jonathan just has a wealth of knowledge about all kinds of things in the world. And it's been such a pleasure to be with him again and to share in all that. And we thank all of you for coming today. And Jonathan, we look forward now to hearing you play.
Thank you.
You got it.
Say a few words about, first of all, welcome. It's a great pleasure to be back in Anderson. I was spending a lot of time here as I was growing up because my grandmother lived here and my mother is from Anderson. So I feel like it's coming back to home. So thank you for the warm welcome. The first piece you heard was, of course, Fanfare for the Common Man by Aaron Copland, probably the most significant American composer that really defined what American music sounds like. Most especially Western film music. The Wild West kind of sound really came from his film scores. And he wrote this piece in 1942 at the request of the conductor of the Cincinnati Orchestra. And America had just entered the Second World War, as you probably know. And there had been a speech by then Vice President Henry Wallace, talking about how America was entering the century of the common man. So Aaron Copland took this concept of common man and turned it into a piece. The fanfare was presented before an orchestral concert. Actually, 10 of these were commissioned by different composers in America at the time to start off these concerts to try to raise a sense of patriotism. And only this one has stood the test of time, and I'm sure you can understand why. It's such a beautiful piece. The next piece on the program is by a French composer named Gigoux, and he was an organist in Paris for 62 years at a church called Saint Augustin. It's a long time to be in any one job, if you ask me, 62 years. Anyway, that was his post, and he wrote this piece in 1890, and it's called Toccata. Making a little bit of a tour of the world at the moment. We started in the United States, went to France, now we're going to Germany to probably the most significant composer, turn of the century, 19th to 20th. In Germany, his name is Max Reger, and he composed this particular piece that you're about to hear in 1901. It's a fugue. So a fugue takes a particular idea, which we call a subject, and it states it one line by itself, and then a second line picks up the same idea with the same statement, usually a fifth higher, and then a third line brings it in, and then a fourth line brings it in. So you're going to hear this starting very simply with the subject in the pedal, and very softly, and then it builds and builds and builds and builds. It gets a little faster and ends full organ, but always with this same theme, same subject coming back, very easy to spot. When I was putting the program together, I came up with the next piece that you see on the program, the Bach Prelude and Fugue in A minor. But when I got here, it dawned on me that actually Peggy Alt's favorite composer is Mozart, and there's no Mozart on the program. So I thought, well, why don't I change it around a little bit? So instead of hearing the Bach A minor Prelude and Fugue, which you see on the program, you're going to hear a piece by Mozart with a huge thank you and hug to Peggy for sponsoring this concert today. It's called Church Sonata in C. And Mozart wrote a whole bunch of these. They're not very well known, and they're very cute pieces for organ solo. But they follow the concept of a concerto. So you're going to hear kind of the regular sound and then a solo sound coming in and out. I'll follow that with a piece of Bach, because I can't not play Bach. The piece that I've chosen is not the A minor Prelude and Fugue, it's actually the E flat fugue. So the E flat fugue that Bach wrote for organ is widely considered, are you ready for this? The best fugue ever composed in history. That's by musicologists. Something's got to be the best, right? And who better than Bach to come up with the best solution to a fugue? Okay, why is it so special? All right, first of all, it's the end of a book that he published called the Klavierübung Book 3, which means keyboard works. Not very impressive title, but it's his testament to the Trinity. So first of all, it's book 3. Then he published it in the year 1739. 3 times 3 is 9. It's composed of 27 movements. 3 cubed is 27. The final fugue, which is what you're going to be hearing, has 3 flats, an extremely unusual key in the Baroque period, by the way, because of the tuning. The fugue is in 3 sections, and the final section weaves together all 3 parts together. I could go on and on about the numerology and Bach's symbolism, but I think you catch the idea that he was trying to underscore Trinity. So I hope you enjoy that piece. First, Mozart's Church Sonata in C, and then I'll follow that with Bach E-flat Fugue. The next piece on the program I commissioned in 2017 to celebrate the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. And I commissioned a composer who's a good friend of mine and also lives in San Francisco. His name is John Carl Hurton. And I asked him, I had a couple requests. One is I wanted to use a classic Reformation hymn tune. So we together chose Ein Festeburg, which is, if you might know by that title, it's A Mighty Fortress, hymn number 110 in your hymnal. And that was the first request. The second request was that we use the old version of the hymn tune and not the one that most people sing. So the one most people sing is four square notes, is pom 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 pom. Pretty just nice and steady. But actually, the version that Martin Luther set was rhythmic, and it goes like this: pom 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 pom. So it's completely different in terms of its character because of that rhythm. I said I wanted something that showed off that old tune as it was originally composed. And then my other request was that the piece be minimalist. So he'd never composed in minimalist style. Minimalism, if you don't know, started in the late 1970s with an American composer named Steve Reich. And the style of minimalism is to use just a little germ of an idea and play with it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Sounds like it would be monotonous, but actually to our very computer-oriented minds, we end up sort of grabbing hold of it and trying to listen for this slight variation in just the way our brains are now functioning because of all of our time in front of computers. So I think the piece is very successful, and I hope you enjoy this. Ein Festeburg. The next piece is called The Peace May Be Exchanged. It's by Dan Locklear. Dan lives in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and he composed a suite called Rubrics. And each movement of the suite, from which this is one of the movements, is one of the rubrics from the Episcopal prayer book, like standing, exchanging the peace, or if you were at the service this morning, you heard me play the last movement, the people respond, Amen. So this particular movement is really quite beautiful. Has been used at presidential inaugurations and presidential funerals in Washington. It's much turning into a standard piece in the organ repertoire for American pathos. So I hope you enjoy this piece. The last pieces on the program are another commission of mine for the 500th anniversary of the Reformation, and also by a San Francisco composer and friend, David Hegarty. David Hegarty is a theater organist in San Francisco, and so the style of this piece is much more bright theater organ style than pieces that you've heard so far on today's program, so a little bit of a change of pace. And again, I specified with him how I wanted the feeling of the Reformation to move forward, and I said, we're always looking at these hymns that are 500 years old that Martin Luther wrote. That's all fine, but how about how it affected the American ethos? And I said, let's look at some old American hymns as our way of talking about the Reformation as it manifested in this country. So I wanted to choose the most obvious book. You may know of it. It's published in 1835. It's called Southern Harmony. And it's a collection of folk meaning anonymous, tunes that were used as hymns in the South. And it was collected by somebody who was very interested in this tradition and published in Connecticut, so go figure. But it was Southern Connecticut, so maybe that's why it's called Southern Harmony. Anyway, so I chose a couple pieces from that. First one is called Pisgah. Pisgah is a hymn tune that looks towards the paradise of who struggle on earth and we move towards paradise is what kind of the basis of the text of the hymn. Very jolly tune. And then for the last movement I chose Saints Bound for Heaven, which is kind of self-explanatory. Again, the concept of singing about the saints going to heaven. In fact, that particular hymn refers to Mount Nebo, and Pisgah, the first tune, talks about summit, and the summit of Mount Nebo is where Moses looked out onto the promised land. So it's the concept of us looking out onto a promised land. Pisgah, the word itself, comes from the Hebrew meaning summit. And then in the middle, I chose a piece that's very near and dear to my heart. I was born in Stanton, Virginia, kind of in the shadow of the Shenandoah River. And so this tune, O Shenandoah, has always been poignant to me, and I think maybe qualifies as America's single best melody ever written. That's saying a lot, because we have a lot of good ones, but I hope you enjoy this trilogy, this triptych by David Hegarty, Appalachian Triptych.
Chuck, I'm going to take just a minute more of your time. I mentioned a while ago about us meeting Jonathan while he was in high school and a member of the youth group at Lewinsville Presbyterian Church in McLean, Virginia. Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, he flies out of Greenville, Spartanburg, to go to Portland, Maine, where the man who was the associate pastor at Lewinsville was the leader of the youth group up there, and very important in his life and our life. And another one of the members of that group, Cassie, is here. And would you please stand up? And thank you, Linda, Linda Clausen, who is here. And she lives in Atlanta. Jonathan, about 3 years ago, I guess it was, had the desire to get as many members of that youth group back together as possible. he got in touch with I don't know how many, but get this, youth group, 50-year reunion. 28 to 30 of those high school youth group came back to Lewinsville Presbyterian, and Jonathan was the one that pulled it together, once again illustrating the depth of this man's care for human beings and those who had been such a part of his life. We want to thank Jonathan once again so much. I had debated whether or not to do this, but I'm going to do it. If any of you are willing to help us bring Jonathan back again, if you will write your name down on a piece of paper and give it to me or Donna, we would greatly appreciate it. Please come over to the parlor and enjoy the refreshments. I'm sorry.